I'm so excited about our next guest. She has this raucously funny special that's out right now that's available on Mark Norman's YouTube channel. So it's streaming right now. You can check it out, and it's really, really funny. There's multiple times where I belly laughed, and I rarely belly laugh when I watch something on YouTube unless it's really funny. And she also has a special coming out at the end of the month called Carmen Lynch in Espanol. So you might guess who we're going to have on. It's Carmen Lynch, comedian, joining us here on the show. Carmen, how you doing?
Hola, everybody.
Hola.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I thought it was so interesting because I don't know when you began doing stand-up, but the first thing that I saw you do was on Letterman, a stand-up set on Letterman. And I was like, usually somebody who's on national TV, especially Letterman for the first time, you might notice some nerves. You might notice, you hedge this, you speak a little faster. I know just doing this job, what it's like when I'm nervous if I'm in a new spot. And you were so chill and so deadpan. And I was wondering, is that your normal, like low blood pressure, low heart rate all the time? Or were you just camouflaging that?
Oh my God, you knew I had low blood pressure? That's amazing. I really do. Maybe it is the low blood pressure. I actually keep it all inside. I know it looks deceptive, but I was just keeping it all together, all inside. So there were nerves, and I think a little bit of nerves always helps, Yeah. But I just kept telling myself, you just have to be up here for 5 minutes. You can do it.
Yeah. Because I heard you tell the story that when you got the call, you were like in tears. You couldn't believe you got that opportunity. And yet here you are on stage and you're so droll and so sardonic. And it's just like you were born to be up there because it looked like you were not nervous at all. So you were just hiding all that.
I mean, there is a lot of self-talk, like every day. I was like, I'm not going to die on stage, all that journaling and therapy really does help. But from the day that you find out until the day that you actually do it, can be a while. I mean, I've done other late nights and they can range from 3 months from now to a month from now to 6 months from now, depending on what the world is going through. I think that year, the first Letterman I did was the year Obama won. So there was a lot of election coverage. So, I'd had to wait a little bit to get on. So there is also frustration, not frustration, but like, you don't want to have too many, you don't want to wait too long or your nerves, it'll just keep going. You're like, oh my God, let me just do this. Let me get it out, but also having a little bit of time to like kind of let it sink in helps a little bit too.
I feel like it might almost be cliche that great comics all have some type of trauma in their childhood. But I mean, I guess there's something to it. I heard you talk about a back brace that you were wearing in 7th and 8th and 9th.
Wow, you did your research.
Well, I love your stuff. And I thought, boy, that is so instructive of like your developmental years, and you're trying to be popular and you're trying to be cool. And then here you are trying to hide a back brace from your friends for 3 years, like right in the middle of when you're trying to be cool. That must have been so hard. Does that experience inform trying to be funny now?
I mean, it is, all of that stuff does help. First of all, it gave me a lot of material. And I did a one-person show about my back brace and getting it off and having panic attacks afterwards, just from keeping myself isolated and just being such an introvert, and then turning it all into like speaking in public. It is quite a shift, but it does, I think all conflict builds your character. So I do think it was helpful. And, looking back, I never thought I was going to be a comic. This happened by accident. So if that's what was meant to happen, I guess it was worth it. The trauma and all the therapy.
What'd you think you were going to do? What'd you think your career path was going to be if it wasn't comedy?
I was pre-med in college, but it only lasted 1 semester. And then I became a psych major because I thought I was going to be a shrink. And I'm the one that's going to therapy now. I'm not giving anyone advice.
Seeing it from that side, being the one that talks to the therapist, do you feel like you could have done that? Been a therapist?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my friends and I are therapists for each other. But I think I like therapy, not only because I'm learning about myself, but I like psychology in general. So sometimes I'm like, am I in therapy just because I feel like I'm back in school? Like, I
Right.
just find it so fascinating.
Well, and stand-up comedy's got to be a pretty emotionally difficult business. I mean, because you're looking for the approval in real time of total strangers, and then you're in real time comparing yourself to the people that just came on the stage before you, and then the people that'll come on the stage after you. I mean, it all must be a really kind of emotionally rough and tumble career path, right?
Yeah, and even the part about going on stage is probably the easiest part. I think the hardest part these days is the comparison on social media. Who's got more followers? This person
Totally.
started 2 years ago, and they're headlining this club that you want after 20 years. Like all of that, the discipline. For me, becoming my own boss was hard because when I first started stand up, I'd already had a couple of jobs, very like low key post college jobs, but I had a boss. So I had to kind of teach myself to be my own boss. So I think there's a lot of aspects to comedy that people don't see where you have to really push yourself and there's a lot of discipline involved.
You're a really good physical comedian. And I think that's in many ways a lost art. I mean, you think about like way back when you're talking about Charlie Chaplin or Laurel and Hardy, but then you have the John Ritters of the world and, Jim Carreys of the world. But then I saw you do Mr. Bean. And I'm like, that is all, it's just pure physical comedy because you aren't speaking. And I'm like, damn. And then at the end of this special, when you do the grand finale on Queef Week, and you're doing the bit about being on the headphones. And this would be the headphones commercial. And like the girl's like bopping her head and like she doesn't hear. And I'm like, that's just really subtly very funny. Have you always been kind of naturally funny from a physical standpoint? Because you talk a lot about how like you're gawky and tall, or at least you were. You're abnormally tall. You're vertically obese. So did you always kind of have the physical comedy part of it?
I mean, I was always silly as a kid. I wasn't necessarily cracking jokes, but I was definitely very like physical and silly at home and with my friends. So some of that is that. I think there's a part of me that has a lot of facial expressions because of my, big eyes. I think sometimes I'm deadpan, but I just show it all in my face instead of in my body sometimes. Like it's just fun to mix it up. And the Mr. Bean thing was Shtick or Treat, which is Mark Norman's, he had this Halloween show where you did an impression of somebody, of a comedian. And I get Mr. Bean all the time. I'm constantly in the comments, like, she looks like Mr. Bean, she looks like Mr. Bean. And my friend Andy Pitts is an amazing impressionist. And he's like, why don't you just go with it? Just be Mr. Bean. And he was on stage with me. If you saw the whole sketch, and I'm doing the whole physical, the Mr. Bean scene where he takes off his pants, but somehow manages to keep his underwear on. And I'm like, oh, I better go running for this because I'm gonna have to show my legs. But it was a good challenge and it was fun. And you forget sometimes you don't have to speak to be funny. You can just use your body. So,
and that's a power, because when you have an audience that doesn't have to even hear you say something and you have them in the palm of your hand and they're laughing, that must feel incredible. That is just what you're doing from a gesture standpoint that's making them crack up.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And any kind of challenge like that where it makes you stretch and makes you even a little more nervous because you're kind of excited to like do something you don't usually do. I think it's good for you. Good for the soul.
So Jerry Seinfeld's been to the news this week because he basically said, it's really hard to be funny now, that the cancel culture's kind of run amok and, it's really hard not to offend people. And I can kind of understand where he's coming from because there has been a push to be far more sensitive. At the same time, you do humor that's dark, that's can be uncomfortable. Mark Normand, I mean, there's sometimes that I listen to Mark and I'm like, oh, I got to turn the channel because like this is going really, really like in a dangerous place. And I'm just like, I'm kind of want to be lighthearted today and like that. But it's interesting and it's funny. So what'd you think about Jerry's comments since you're in the mix right now trying to walk that line?
I mean, I think everything changes as time goes by. And we do have to kind of adapt. I mean, some things can't be said anymore. Maybe that is good, but also, you know, you can't listen to the super wokes, or we can't say anything. And I think comedy should be open and available for anyone who can handle it, as long as you're not hurting people. These are jokes. And I like pushing the envelope. I like getting darker. I think my next hour, which I'm working on now, is darker than Queef Week, and I enjoy it. I like going to those places where I can't tell these jokes on a late night. I mean, some of them I could, but others I'm like, well, this is fun and it's good for me. And when you get half of the audience laughing really hard at them, those feel like your true fans.
It's so interesting that you're able to do shows bilingually, because half your family is from Spain. You grew up in Spain until you were about 8 years old. And so obviously you're fluent in Spanish, and then, you know, half your family's American. So this is where you've been for a long time. And so you'll do shows in Spanish, shows in English, and you have this special coming out at the end of the month, Carmen Lynch in Espanol. And it's interesting because your act, I feel, is very tight linguistically. Like the joke is about a certain word, a certain phrase. It's very sharp, it's very tight. But if you're not completely fluent in another language, it must be daunting at times for you because you're so specific with your words and your writing. So can it be nerve-wracking because you're like, oh, I don't know that language as well as I know English?
Yes. For the Spanish show, I definitely felt like I was studying for a final exam in college. Like I was trying to remember phrases the right way. I was flipping verbs and nouns. You know, it's the opposite of in English. And then I'm used to doing Spanish shows in New York. And so that's mostly Latinos that listen. So their vocabulary is sometimes different from Castilian in Spain. So there were a lot of things I was juggling. But at the same time, it was one of those interesting challenges where I'm like, you know what? I'm only in Spain for a week. If this sucks, I'm leaving the country. And, you know, if people don't enjoy this, well, I challenge myself. But I can even tell when I'm watching the Spanish special that sometimes I do this kind of like grunt, like, ah. And I'm like, am I just trying to think of a word right there? I just can't remember. So it comes out different. I feel like my personality is slightly different. But it was definitely fun to do, and I would do it again.
We'll wrap up with this, since we have so many sports fans that watch this show, that listen to me on Sirius XM daily, is that you were very tall growing up. You still are tall. You're about, what, 6 foot or so?
6 feet. Yeah, still. No shrinking yet.
No. You said your dad shrunk though, right?
My dad was 6'2", and now I'm a little taller.
Look at that. You beat him. But you said you never played basketball growing up because it wasn't cool. But now you've begun to do a little basketball with like your nephew or your niece or something.
My boyfriend's son.
Oh,
yeah.
Your boyfriend's son. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of into it. And so
I love it. Yeah.
There's a huge boom right now for women's basketball, the WNBA, Caitlin Clark. So I don't know. There might be room on a roster somewhere.
I would love it.
You probably still have your college eligibility, you know, so you can go back and maybe play for William and Mary or something.
Oh my God. No, I think growing up in Spain, sports at the time weren't a big thing. And then when I came to the US when I was 8, I remember soccer was the big thing too.
Yeah.
And then I just never really got into sports until I went to high school and I ran track and field. And I even asked our basketball coach in high school, I said, you know, can I try out for the team? And she was like, have you ever played? And I'm like, no. And she was like, well, why do you want to play? And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm tall. She just looked at me like, yeah, that's not enough.
It's really funny. Very funny. Well, if we need help in a pickup game for the crew here, I'm going to let you know.
I'm in.
Come down and play in the post for us.
Okay, cool.
Extremely, extremely funny special. I highly encourage this. It is it's really, really laugh out loud funny. Queef Week is right now streaming on Mark Norman's YouTube channel. It's also on Carmen's YouTube channel as well. And coming out at the end of the month, Carmen Lynch in Espanol, which is amazing for bilingual speakers and also Spanish speakers. So check that out. That is May the 28th on YouTube. That'll be on Carmen's YouTube channel. Check it out there. She's got a ton of funny stuff on YouTube and 2 comedy albums and just really amazing stuff.
And Carmen, it's all on Carmen Comedian. At Carmen Comedian has all the info.
CarmenComedian.com is the website.
Oh, no, sorry. The Instagram.
At
Carmen Comedian. Yeah.
And you've got tour dates also this summer, right?
Tour dates on CarmenLynch.com, or you can go on Punch Up Live. There's videos and links to all my shows on Punch Up Live, but you can go to CarmenLynch.com. I mean, just look for Carmen Lynch.
Just look for Carmen Lynch. You'll find her somewhere. Really cool. Carmen, thanks so much. This was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.